Good evening, folks. My name is Jerry Bogaz. I'm an assistant director with the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council. Welcome to our regional freight forum this evening. This is the second of two sessions that we're having today. We had a first session at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and these sessions are to gather input into the development of the next regional transportation plan, which will be called Moving Forward 2055. That plan is due to be adopted in September of 2025. Over the fall of 2023, we conducted a number of different public outreach activities, collected many comments and suggestions from the public, several thousand most likely. And now here in the spring of 2024, we're conducting topical workshops to gather information on very specific parts of the plan. Tonight, the topic will be regional freight. There'll be two other workshops in April, on the 16th. I'm sorry, the 16th and the 30th. So the next 3 Tuesdays, and we'll be covering topics like active transportation and coordinated public transit and human services transportation. And then there'll be 3 other workshops that will be scheduled in May. So having said that, we want to move into starting our workshop tonight. And I'm going to turn the microphone over to Stephanie Brooks with our public outreach consultant. Stephanie's going to explain the ground rules and arrangements for this workshop.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here tonight. You'll see on the slide that participants who are on tonight will remain muted, but you can always place any of your comments or questions into the chat function, and I'll describe where that is in just a moment. At tonight's meeting, we're going to be using a really cool outreach tool called Poll Everywhere. It's a polling software where you can give your feedback on some questions, and we'll be using that to get your input. Again, the chat is available for comments. The workshop is being recorded, and if you have the need for AICP credits, we are offering 1.5 credits of AICP for tonight's session. I will put a link at the end of where you can go to log your hour. So you'll see on your screen, the chat window is that just little text bubble, and you'll just type your comments in the chat. And you can ask any questions you have, or answer a poll if you use the software and then you have another comment that you'd like to add. Feel free to put it in the chat. Okay, so we'll be starting off with just an introduction about NYMTC, and Jerry will lead us a little bit about the plan 2055 and what we're hoping to get from you this evening. I'll provide an overview of how the Poll Everywhere software works. We'll be talking about freight in the NYMTC region and ask you some questions about your thoughts about those issues. And then a brief slide about the AICP credit at the end. And any questions, of course, that you have. So, Jerry, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. So although we are focused on gathering input in these sessions, we do have to provide some context so that you understand who we are and why we're doing this, and some of the details around how freight moves around our region. So the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, or NYMTC as it's known, is a metropolitan planning organization, and we're responsible for New York City, Long Island, and the lower Hudson Valley. I'll explain what an MPO, as we're known, is in just a second, but you see our mission here: collaborative forum for our member agencies, providing sound technical analysis, developing a shared regional vision, and really the bottom line is trying to capture the maximum amount of federal funds we can for transportation improvements in the region that we cover. Next slide, Stephanie. So NYMTC is a council. It's a regional council. So we have 9 voting members and 7 advisory members. Looking at this slide, you see on the left 5 suburban county executives are council members: Westchester, Rockland, and Putnam to the north, and Nassau and Suffolk to the east. We have the New York City Transportation Commissioner and City Planning Director. We have the New York State Transportation Commissioner and the Chief Executive Officer of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. Those are our 9 voting members. Advisory members include the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, as well as the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, which is our sister MPO across the river in northern New Jersey. Next slide. And this is the region that we cover, as I just described: 5 boroughs of New York City, 3 lower Hudson Valley counties, and 2 Long Island counties. Next slide. These metropolitan planning organizations are required under federal transportation authorization acts, and they're intended to be a mechanism for deciding on and planning for the use of federal dollars in a region at the choice of the agencies that constitute that region. One of the main products of the planning process that we have to follow, and as a matter of fact, it's a foundational product, is the Regional Transportation Plan. We're required to update this every 4 years. The current Regional Transportation Plan was adopted in the fall of 2021. The new one will be adopted in September of 2025. So we're currently in that update cycle. The plans require a minimum 20-year planning horizon. In the case of this next plan, it's actually going to be 29 years. They are required to have both long and short-range strategies, actions, and potential projects, and all projects and strategies considered in the plan for financial plan development. We have to show what we anticipate our finances will be in the long term also. This is a very important requirement for the planning process, and it really is, as I said, a foundational piece of the required planning process. Next slide. So our members have been developing the initial parts of the draft of the plan, of the Moving Forward 2055 plan. So what I'm going to be showing you now are the proposed guiding principles for the plan and the proposed shared vision goals for the plan. So there are 9 guiding principles that are proposed. You see them here. Considering the needs of all users, making the best use of federal resources, considering all modes of transportation, planning for modal shifts, connections, accessibility, and operability, supporting multi-agency approaches, collaborating with other government entities, engaging the public and stakeholders, investing in the collection and sharing of data, and being open to innovation and technological advancements. So that's the guiding framework of our activities under the plan. Next slide. Our members have also proposed 6 shared vision goals. The goal statements are more extensive than this, but these are the areas that the goals are in: safety and security, infrastructure, resiliency, congestion, land use, and transportation equity. Next slide. Now, for each vision goal, we develop what's essentially a goal module around that goal, and these modules form the strategic basis of the plan. So we have a description of the goal. The members have defined draft objectives for each goal. We look into recent trends related to the goal, current conditions, and existing initiatives related to the goal. And then the module proposes recommended strategies and actions, as well as performance metrics. Next slide. Those recommended strategies and actions usually include items within these categories: planning and research initiatives, data collection, forecasting, and performance assessment, planning process recommendations, and program recommendations. Next slide, please. So the plan usually recommends projects, programs, and studies in addition to these strategies and actions. So these are specific projects that are proposed for potential federal funding in the future that will ultimately become part of our medium-range transportation improvement program. And we usually have 2 categories of projects in the plan. We have those that are fiscally constrained. In other words, they are seen to fit within the resources we forecast we're going to be receiving over the period of the plan, and those that are aspirational, part of the vision element of the plan, which will be pursued potentially if resources are available. Next slide, please. Now, because of federal requirements, we do have several special elements that are appendices to the main plan document. As you can see them here, pedestrian and bicycle element, coordinated public transit, human services, transportation plan, regional freight element, which is what we're collecting information tonight for. We also have an environmental justice and Title VI assessment and environmental mitigation and new consultation. But again, this evening's workshop is focused on gathering input for the regional freight element. Next slide. All right, so now we're going to go back to Stephanie, and she's going to take us through the mechanics of using Poll Everywhere. Stephanie?
Yep. So I'll be putting in the chat a link to the Poll software that we'll be using. You'll just go into your browser. If for any reason the chat message takes you to a "you're leaving NYMTC" website kind of message, you can go ahead and click that. Click yes, proceed. But you can always type into your browser pollev.com/NYMTC to access the poll. You will just put in your name, click continue, and you'll be prompted to answer questions. And if you have any trouble with anything, just please give us a shout out into the chat and we can troubleshoot with you. So we'll go on. We'll have a couple of icebreaker slides to sort of get a sense of how the software works and also where you're coming from. So you should see here on your screen a map and the poll question is, where are you participating from? You just sort of want to touch with your mouse or your finger or whatever device you're using where you are coming from. So we have someone out in Suffolk County. Great, thank you. We like to see NYMTC representation. There's a little box as well. It says outside the region if you are attending from outside the region. Anybody else? Are we all from Suffolk County? Oh, great. Someone is in Manhattan. Okay, wonderful. Give it another 30 seconds or so just to get, oh, Nassau County. Excellent. Great. So we'll give it another 10 or 15 seconds just to get people familiar with the software. And as you can see here with the map, you'll see your results in real time as you answer some of these questions. Okay, we'll go on to the next question, which is where are you representing an organization today? So just, click onto if you're a state agency, are you government, are you transportation agency, community advocacy group, a citizen, consultant team, whatever you happen to be. So we can just get a sense of where you're coming from tonight and who you're representing. Okay, we have one community or advocacy group. That's great. Anybody else? I don't see any questions in the chat showing any concern. So hopefully the software is working for everybody. Maybe everybody is representing a community group. All right, we'll give it another 10 seconds. You can always put in the chat as well who you're representing if you'd like to state that there. We'll go on to the next question now. Really just sort of a little bit of a brainstorm here. What sort of top of mind concerns do you have on the topic of this session? So just your thoughts about freight. What are things that are of concern to you? Just when you hear the term, what do you think about? What brought you to the meeting today? Anything like that. So this is an open-ended question. So what you would do, great, decreasing the number of trucks, great. You would just put in your thoughts and then just press submit. You can do more than one if you have a few things you'd like to say. You can type in your thoughts, press submit, and it can go as many times as you like. Anyone else? Decreasing the effect on local communities. Great. Okay. Thank you. We'll give it another 10 seconds or so. Okay, I do see a chat comment concerned about effects on local communities and environment. Thank you. Thanks very much. So that's sort of added to the poll here. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next slide. And here is where we have the main content of our presentation about freight in the NYMTC region, and we'll have some poll questions distributed throughout the presentation. So Jerry, I think it's on you again.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. And thanks to all for those icebreaker exercises. We actually do collect some information that we can use in those. Our next item up has to do with the aspects of freight movement that you feel most likely impact or most impact, I should say, your family or your community or your organization, depending on who you're, representing and what your perspective is. So this is important. We want to learn a bit about how you feel that freight and the movement of goods in the region affects you personally. So you take a minute and put in any information that you want us to know about. We'll just take a minute to do that. And from the previous exercise, we do have concerned about effects on local communities and environment. So have that from the previous. This particular question does overlap the previous a little bit, but feel free to add in anything here that you feel you want us to know about.
We do have one more chat comment in here. The community has little ability to provide input into the process. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hopefully this is improving that ability. Okay, another 10 seconds or so. A minute.
Yep. Oh, here we go. An increasing amount of online orders. Would like to see more freight with ships, freight rail, and cargo bikes. Thank you very much. Okay. Jerry, I think we can.
Yep, we can go to
the next one. Okay. This is just a multiple choice question. Well, actually, you can rank. And how this ranking system works is you select one of the answers and place it above or below the other one. So say purchase online, pick up a store is your most frequent, the share of goods that you purchased. You just want to click on that and lift it up. Yep, there we go. People have got it. Awesome. So far, we've got purchase online and pick up a store. Purchase online, have items delivered at home. Purchase at a store. We had this meeting earlier this afternoon, and this mirrors that as well.
Yes, this very closely mirrors the earlier. Interesting. Okay, I think we can move on, Stephanie.
There we go. Then we have over the past 12 months, have home deliveries in your community either increased, decreased, or remained the same? This is just a multiple choice question where you select one option, and we've got increased so far. Yeah. Again, this mirrors this afternoon as well. That is interesting.
Okay, another 30 seconds here, maybe 20. Okay, let's move along. All right, so now we're going to give you some, with those as sort of table setters for this discussion, I'm going to give you some basic information about how freight moves in our region. And then we're going to be asking you questions about your perceptions of certain trends that we observe happening in terms of how they might continue into the future. So we're going to be looking at, why freight moves, where and how it moves, reviewing those key trends, and getting your feedback on the likelihood and impacts of those trends, and then getting your feedback on what you see as the regional freight needs. So next slide. So freight transportation is movement of goods using various transportation modes. And it really involves all the things you see on the screen here, moving raw materials, moving manufactured products between warehouses and moving them to retailers. There are agricultural products that move in our region. E-commerce orders delivered to your door, that's certainly been something that's been on the increase, as you've indicated. Medical supplies delivered to hospitals, home heating oil delivered to residences, construction materials delivered to job sites, and also the reverse of that, which is construction and demolition debris taken from job sites. And of course, waste picked up and moved to recycling or disposal facilities. So as you can see, freight transportation and the movement of goods, and in some cases bads, really runs the gamut and touches every part of our lives and our economic activity. Next slide. And, freight plays a huge role in the economy, as you're seeing here. Freight intensive industry sectors employ more than 1.2 million people, which is 19% of the private sector employment. And they pay $94 billion in annual wages. And you can see the list at the very first bullet of those freight intensive industry sectors in our region. But all sectors of the economy need to some degree freight transportation and the movement of goods. So although these are particularly freight intensive, there are certainly many others that involve movement of goods. Next slide. We are at the center of a multi-state metropolitan region, and so NYMTC is 10 counties, but there's a region that stretches from eastern Pennsylvania through northern New Jersey and into southwestern and central Connecticut. And this region is really one of the most important economic clusters in the country. In this region, there's significant freight land use development. So there are land uses that are really devoted to the movement of freight and freight logistics. And there are very high commodity tonnages moving around this region with values that are high, and they're moving by all modes of transportation. Next slide. Okay, I just wanted to, as we're going through this, I just realized, Stephanie, we do have another comment in the chat pod, which is
Yes, we do. I'll just read it out. A concern: federal control of rail transportation is far-reaching. In the world of the railroad industry, when federal preemption is pitted against local zoning, environmental and safety regulations, local authorities lose in instances that even tangentially impact rail transportation. The Surface Transportation Board has an extremely broad view of federal preemption, determining that many railroad actions holding even the slightest association with the movement of rail freight are not subject to state or local regulations.
Mm-hmm. And that's an excellent comment, and it's a reality of the situation, particularly with regard to rail freight. So thank you for that, and something that needs to be noted going forward, and has been noted in our region. Okay, sorry we missed that earlier, but I wanted to make sure that we accommodated it. You can see here from this map the region's freight generating land uses in the ochre color, and where they are. There's a lot of freight generating land uses that are on the edges of the larger region. Some of them are in agricultural areas, some of them are where land is cheaper, and there are many distribution centers and warehouses being built and so forth. And they tend to generate more travel because of their location. So this is an important characteristic of our region. On the next slide, you will see the freight handling land uses. So these are areas where you're talking about distribution centers, warehousing, and so forth, where where freight is moved to and from in order to be in the distribution system. These tend to be more closely in the center of the region, but not totally. They tend to be around areas where distribution is happening and where people are living. And again, where these land uses are placed is very important to the amount of travel that is undertaken to move these goods. Next slide. As we said earlier, freight transportation involves all modes of transportation. So you're talking about rail, heavy truck, some goods moved by pipeline. There's water transportation of goods. You have different levels of distribution, including what's called less than truckload, which is more of the in-time type of delivery. Light trucks, air, things are moved by air. Rail and water are best for heavier goods generally, and air is best for lightweight, high-value goods and also perishable goods. Trucking is used for a range of commodity types and trip distances. So all these aspects are working in any given day to transport goods around our region. Next slide. And of course, this is an example of a supply chain. So not only are these modes being used, but they're being used for different aspects of moving materials and goods to where they need to go. So we're not going to spend a lot of time going through this, but you can see where on the domestic side, you have an origination or a manufacturing processing location, and then the distribution to warehousing, and then finally to fulfillment and shipping to retails, restaurants, those types of things. These supply chains are obviously very important. They've been in the news recently because of disruptions to supply chains since the pandemic, and in just this recently with the situation in Baltimore, can have economic impacts and impact everything from the timing of an availability of goods to the price of goods. So very important that these supply chains be recognized and operate efficiently if at all possible. Next slide.
And before we get to the next slide, there was one more follow-up to the comment about rail transportation. Just
Okay.
that the issue of preemption needs to be addressed. Localities need to have input and oversight. So just to follow up to that.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just quickly, some key freight statistics. There's an enormous amount of goods and enormous value of goods that move around our region. And we're just talking about the NYMTC planning area, the 10 counties. Over 300 million tons, worth $431 billion moved in, out, or within the NYMTC region in 2018. So one of the reasons that this is 2018 and we're 6 years down the road is that this information is collected only intermittently and must be done through private means, because you're talking about commodities that are being carried by private shippers. And so it's rather daunting to collect this information. It's not done every year, certainly. We are in the midst of collecting additional information now for the next round of and that will be used in the new freight plan. But at least in 2018, these are some of the statistics. And as you can see, the directions involved on the left-hand side, the pie charts, the majority of the goods were coming into our region. Some were moving within the region, some were moving between counties, and others were outbound. But clearly, we absorb goods as opposed to send an equal amount out. In terms of mode, as you can see, we're very, very truck dependent, 92.5% in terms of tonnage and 87.9% in terms of value. There are small slices for air travel, rail, and water. But unfortunately for us, the region is extremely dependent on trucks, and there are a number of reasons for that. Next slide. In terms of how the system performs, what's shown here are bottleneck locations accounting for 50% of truck delay costs in the NYMTC region. So these are roadway segments that contribute to that truck delay. And this is half of the truck delay is just in these segments alone. When you take a close look at this map, it's really not surprising in terms of what areas are highlighted in the map, but it does show some of the challenges of being so dependent on trucks in a region like ours. Next slide. And one big reason why we're so dependent on trucks is the nature of the freight rail infrastructure in our region. There's only one physical crossing of the Hudson River that it can be used to bring goods east of Hudson in our region, and that is in Selkirk, New York, about 120 miles north of New York City. So many of, or much of the rail freight volume that's coming into our region is being offloaded in either eastern Pennsylvania or northern New Jersey, and then drayed or moved across the river by truck. And that puts additional congestion into the various crossings of the Hudson River, which are limited, obviously. And it also means that east of Hudson, the majority of the goods are moving by truck, either from the rail or just truck that's coming across into our region. We are, in fact, a corridor region in some ways, in that goods move through our region between New England and the North Atlantic states, as well as all the goods that are coming into our region and leaving our region. So this is a real example of how the physical characteristics and topography of a region can affect the characteristics of goods movement and how it affects our particular region. Next slide. And obviously, when you're using and you're dependent on truck transportation to move goods around, there are issues of particulate matter emissions from those diesel trucks. And what you're seeing here is an example of the concentration of particulate matter emissions relative to various communities in New York City. And not surprisingly, they're around major truck routes. And the purple and darker purple show the greatest concentrations of particulate matter emissions in New York City. We have other maps that show Long Island and the Hudson Valley, but it just shows that there are real impacts not only to the economy, but also to the environment and to people's health. Particulate matter is not good for people's health, obviously. Next slide. So some of the key trends, and this is where we're going to get into you providing additional input to us. Some of the key trends that we see at this point affecting freight transportation and goods movement are where the goods are produced. So you have supply chain disruptions and climate effects, where and how the goods are transported, cleaner trucks and e-commerce delivery. So the nature of goods movement has been changing and in a number of ways. And then finally, equitable distribution of burdens and benefits. So you have the safety aspects of freight in terms of roadway safety and other safety aspects, as well as access to economic opportunities. We're going to be talking about each of these and asking you for your opinions. So if we can move on to the next slide. So supply chain disruption. This has very much been in the news. The picture on the right is of the Key Bridge in Baltimore when it was still the Key Bridge. It no longer is. And that's a great example, although it's an acute example of what happens when a key link is severed. With the Key Bridge, it was two links actually, because the bridge itself is no longer there, and that carried some freight over it by truck. But also the channel that had provided access to and from the Port of Baltimore was itself clogged by the bridge debris, so that you lost two key links there, one being the bridge itself and the other being the channel. So something like that can have far-reaching impacts. Similarly, trade relationships, war, disasters, pandemics can also disrupt logistics systems. We've certainly seen that with regard to all of those recently. So industry, supply chains have been adapting to increase resiliency. You can see some of the elements here: diversifying onshoring or nearshoring of production, increasing inventory, partnerships, and contract relationships. All these go into the pull and tug of where disruptions occur and how the goods movement reacts and responds to that. Next slide. The climate effects on freight. Well, there's several here. First of all, freight land uses and freight facilities are affected by climate change in terms of high risk for flooding, sea level rise, and so on and so forth. And of course, climate effects on freight, there are also climate effects of freight in terms of the level of greenhouse gases that is produced by the freight transportation system and the inefficiencies thereof. So all these things are items that and trends that affect goods movement. Next slide. Cleaner trucks. So alternative fuels can reduce carbon and diesel particulate emissions. And we are in a transitional period now where we are beginning to move away from diesel conveyances and looking at other forms that are cleaner. We did do a clean freight corridors planning study. The map on the right represents the recommendations from that study, which identified and prioritized corridors for investment in alternative fueling and electric charging infrastructure. And that's based on where goods are moving. And we also did an analysis of the future markets for different types of vehicles and different technologies and so forth. Several agencies in our region do offer incentives for low or zero emissions trucks, but there's still widespread challenges to fleet transition, and it's not happening as fast as it potentially could. And we need to try to bring together the changes in technology with the changes in infrastructure that will support those technologies. Next slide. So there are two technologies we wanted to highlight here, particularly with regard to cleaner vehicles. One is battery electric. So these are battery electric vehicles powered by the electrical grid. There are some light trucks and small vans that are currently making deliveries in our region that are battery electric. The barriers to battery electric are fairly long charging times, and where there are facilities for public fast charging, they're not really designed for trucks, particularly not large trucks, which need a certain level of space. So that's not always available to the goods movement sector. There's a high upfront vehicle cost also. These vehicles are not cheap when they're battery electric. And there's limited vehicle model availability for certain duty cycles. Now, those are the barriers. There are opportunities also, including pilot programs for activities like drayage or yard trucks, which are short haul trucks, and also learning from European counterparts about how certain barriers are overcome. But this is a definite area that can be increased in the future, and part of what we're hopefully planning for is a way to support the change over to battery electric. The other electric technology is the next slide, and that is hydrogen fuel cell. So these are fuel cell electric vehicles. They are electric, but they're powered by hydrogen made through methods like water electrolysis or natural gas reforming. So think of these as chemical electric generators, and they do not require batteries, nor do they require charging, but they do require hydrogen. So the barriers are large fuel throughput needed to justify station costs. So you're essentially creating a new distribution system for hydrogen. Limited fueling availability currently. We did look at that in the Clean Freight Corridor study, and there are some hydrogen fueling locations in this multi-state region, but they're not extensive. There are regulatory restrictions on the transport and storage of compressed gases, limited vehicle model availability, although more vehicles are being produced, more vehicle types are being manufactured than before, and some in the freight industry see this as a wave of the future. And then finally, most hydrogen is currently produced with fossil fuels, which kind of defeats the purpose. So, but there are opportunities too in terms of U.S. transit agencies that are out there demonstrating the viability of zero emission production using fuel cells. And there are various other tests of the technology that are out there. Next slide. Not surprisingly, and I think we've touched on it a little bit in the previous questions we were asking you, the increase in e-commerce is a trend that we see. That was happening before the pandemic. There was a growth, but the pandemic, which you can see as the sort of pinkish area, created a 33.5% increase in one quarter for obvious reasons during the lockdowns. So this has accelerated the trend of increased e-commerce sales and deliveries. And we are experiencing that in terms of delivery traffic in communities and so forth. Next slide. So with the delivery boom, there are a number of public sector considerations with that, including the increase in delivery vehicles and trips, and where fulfillment centers are being developed and converted in our region, and those are land use issues. And clearly this touches on things like curb management. How do you manage curb spaces? Congestion. There are emissions aspects to this in terms of local emissions in local communities. Safety is an aspect, and then you can see the various land use and workforce issues related to the fulfillment center development. So this delivery boom is having large impacts on economic activity and on communities. Next slide. So this is the final, I believe this is the final trend, is how do you make the distribution of the benefits and burdens of freight transportation equitable? And this is an important area, state and regional economies and freight stakeholders versus community impacts. I think we've already touched on this with some of the comments we've received tonight already. And so it is a definite area where balancing those burdens and benefits is a trend that's going to be extending into the future. Now, I believe, Stephanie, the next slide is going back to the polling.
Yes, yes. There is another poll coming up now. You should see it automatically on your screen. The question is, again, this is a ranking question. So the question is about regional freight trends impacts. So which of these trends that we've been talking about this evening do you think will be most impactful in our region? So it would be rated most impactful to least impactful. So say if climate effects was very impactful, you'd rank that up, or safety, you'd rank that up, e-commerce delivery. So as you select on an item, you'll see the option to place an arrow up or an arrow down to rank it above or below something else. Let's see if we have any results here. Oh, great. Oh, we're seeing some great feedback. So this is very similar to this afternoon's. Climate effects is number one. Then we have freight and safety. We have e-commerce deliveries in third place, supply chain distribution, and then access to economic opportunities, and then cleaner trucks. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to scroll down so you can see the next question. We want to get as large a font as possible so everyone can see. So there we go. So I think we still have climate effects as the highest, most impactful trend, and then safety. Okay, great. We'll give it another 10 seconds. See if anybody else has feedback. All right, and our next question is more of an open-ended question where you can just type in your thoughts, then hit submit, And just like before, it'll show up on the screen. This is a question of where should these trends lead? So Jerry, if you could sort of lay that out, like what are your thoughts of where these, what will be the outcome of these
Yeah,
trends? Like, for example, climate.
the operative word here is should. That we're asking for your perspective on where they should lead, not where they will, but rather where they should from your perspective. So, if the climate is having impacts on freight and vice versa, well, in your view, where would that lead? Now, you don't have to necessarily comment on every trend, but the ones that really jump out at you, where should they lead in your view, in your perspective? And by getting people's perspectives on these things, it really helps us to try to anticipate, because it's not always predictable where the trends will lead, or could lead, but people's perspectives do help us to get a framework on that.
Great. There's a comment coming up. We should see more freight train and last mile delivery hubs with micromobility. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, if I recall, one of the areas where there was an interest in the early part was in last mile as a
Absolutely.
concern and as an opportunity.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Okay, we'll give it about another 20 seconds, see if anyone else has feedback here.
Maybe 25.
Okay.
Okay, I think we can keep going.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute, there's something in the chat.
All right, oh yes, in the chat we hear, I imagine that regional pollution might be decreased somewhat. Local pollution will increase. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes.
Two sides of the same coin.
Right. Never. And now we move more into more generalized questions and the freight problem areas. We'd like to get your thoughts on various facilities and your own relationship to goods movement in your community. So again, this is another open-ended question where you can just type in your response either into the poll or into the chat as well. What facilities are most relevant to goods movement in your community or for your organization? And it can be both. Oh, we have another comment here. Another concern, freight cars leave full and come back full to be economically viable. Trucks have to bring commodities to be railed out, then trucks have to pick up the incoming commodities to deliver them. All this brings many added trucks to local communities that house freight yards. Location matters. There just can't be rail for rail's sake. Impacts on surrounding communities must be taken into consideration, which I don't believe is currently happening. Location matters and communities matter. Thank you very much. If anyone wants to enter into the poll, please feel free to add a statement or just a point of view. And facilities could mean anything. It could mean waste management. It could mean Amazon warehouses, whatever is most relevant to goods movement in your community. It could mean trucks, could mean rail. Let's see if there's any more chat questions. No? I think, Jerry, we're getting all our feedback in the chat for this one. So if it's okay with you,
Sure, let's move on. But
going.
that's perfectly fine. Sometimes it's better in the old chat pod.
Yeah, right. You can say more too.
Yes.
All right, let's go to the next question. All right, now we have another open-ended question. Feel free to answer here or in the chat. Where do you see bottlenecks or choke points in freight movement? So that is area like this afternoon we had a response that a certain location, like maybe it was a bridge or a road. Like where is freight movement a place where you really see those bottlenecks, where you see those delays?
And I want to just underscore, Stephanie, that we're not necessarily talking about roadways.
Yes.
It could be at a facility. It could be, trucks delivering. It's really, this is a broad question.
Jerry, there's a response. Do not know enough info on this.
Well, we're really asking for your experience in this too. We don't expect you obviously to know every choke point in the region, but it's valuable to us to know for the people who participate in this, if they're aware of anything in their communities or for their organizations that comes to mind.
Yeah, we do have a chat response, of course, at bridges and tunnels, but also on rail lines that only have one set of tracks and no workaround if there is a problem on the line.
That's an excellent point. Rail freight, we talked about rail freight infrastructure, but oftentimes the rail freight infrastructure is old, and you have situations where there is only one track, and that can create rail bottlenecks. Okay, is there one more left after this, Stephanie?
Oh, wait, here's another comment here. The desire to decrease polluting infrastructure highways, or the desire to decrease polluting infrastructure, highways moving past residential communities. Yeah. Thank you. All right, so I believe we have, we might have one more. Yes, we have one more question. This is just your thoughts, just brainstorm, if you could have anything you wanted in terms of how things could work better, how can the movement of goods be improved? Oh, there's a response here. There should always be a way to work around a problem. Like that. Take that to heart. That's
We agree, actually.
life advice right there. Who knew we were going to get a life advice? It's great. But any other thoughts about, what are your thoughts about how good movement of goods could be improved? Could be anything from, a lot of suggestions were already made tonight, but also anything that you've had an idea. Oh, looking at a truck and thinking, oh, I wish XYZ, I wish it would do this, or I wish we had this. This is a place where you can let us know what that idea is. Okay, one need more loading zones for New York City. Yeah,
that's a very prominent issue in New York City, and a very underrated one, in the sense that curb management for all uses is becoming more and more of a delicate problem, shall we say?
yes.
Not only for deliveries, but also for parking, for bike sharing, for electric vehicle charging, for all kinds of things.
And we saw that photo, Jerry, with the goods distribution, and there was all of those boxes in this back in the presentation. There were all those boxes on the side of the road, taking up parking spaces. It was like a little jerry-rigged, freight distribution center in the middle of the street. So
you have situations where there are deliveries blocking bus lanes.
Absolutely.
All kinds of things like that.
We have another comment here in the chat on the poll. Moving goods by rail is a great idea, but the location where the yards are is important along main lines. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. We also have another comment that just came in through the chat. Movement of freight always should be done with an eye to the impacts it will have on residential neighborhoods and wildlife areas. There needs to be harmony between the two. Thank you. Thanks very much. We're getting some great rail comments today. This is excellent. Jerry, do you want to give it another 30 seconds or do we want to move on and see if there's any other additional questions?
I think at this point we can probably move on.
Okay. All right. So we have our, if you, for more information about, about our, the plan that Jerry mentioned, you can just go to movingforward2055.org and I'll put that in the chat. And does anybody have any additional other questions they'd like to put into the chat?
Or actually, we can do this by raising the electronic hand, and
Yes.
we can unmute you also.
Right, if you want to raise your electronic hand. Okay, we have someone who has raised a hand, Linda. Could Linda be unmuted? I think I have the capacity to unmute you. There we go. Thanks for joining us. Yes, you sound great. Thank you.
Thanks. This is really good tonight, and I appreciate it. So I'm with a community group called Town Line Association. I don't know if you probably aren't aware of it, but we have a private developer trying to bring a rail line in along the Port Jefferson line, and the community is opposed to it. My question is, are there more ways for communities to be involved with NYMTC than may already be happening? It's very difficult to talk to anyone on the federal level regarding rail and things like that. It's really, you can talk to your local people on local issues, but when it comes to rail, it's almost like this own, it's up in space. There's no one who will answer you or help you understand the reasonings behind certain things.
Right.
And I was just wondering if there's anything you guys can do to help local communities be more involved and understand the process more and have an input in the process. Like I typed in before, rail is great, but where it is matters.
Yes.
And it's very hard to people at the STB, they're not talking to you.
Right.
There's no one who, it's even hard to talk to someone from Long Island Railroad. It's very difficult for communities to have any impact when it comes to at least moving freight by rail.
Understood. And actually, well, the answer to your question is yes. I mean, we do try to play the role where we can of sort of a one-stop shopping center in terms of transportation issues, particularly federal transportation issues. The challenge we have is there are 175 local municipalities in our planning area,
Right.
one of which is New York City, obviously. But so that makes it difficult to provide the same level of information to all municipalities. However, we do engage municipalities in specific studies, and if there are issues that we learn about from municipalities, we will play the role of trying to get you information and or contact information on who to try to talk to.
Well, and I thank you for that, but there's a difference between municipalities and community groups.
That's true too. Yeah.
And I understand that my local town supervisor would have a better chance of reaching out to you and getting
Right.
some information. But I'm the co-president of a civic group
Right.
that I don't have the same reach as the supervisor. And so, I believe in bottom up for everything when it
Right.
comes to housing issues and things like that. Smart growth, it can't come from the top down. We all know that at this point, right? It has to be successful, it has to go from the bottom up. Well, shouldn't that be the same way when it comes to rail?
Yeah, well, yeah, given the regulatory framework, it doesn't always work that way. But that's an important distinction you made, and it's acknowledged. We do try to also maintain contact with non-governmental organizations, which is what you categorize your organization, but we don't know all of them, obviously. And there are probably thousands in our planning area, you know.
You
when
know
get down
us
to the
now,
level.
Town Line
Yes, we do.
Association.
We
I'm gonna
do.
put my my phone number in.
Sure.
So
And I'm happy to follow up with you offline.
I
If that would
really
help.
appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much.
And thank you for taking the time to answer my question.
Sure, of course.
Jerry, we do have one more comment in the chat. It would also help if packaging could be kept to a minimum. I think that's just sort of adding to the, how could, you know, improve goods movement.
In any number of freight workshops we've had, or even studies related to goods movement, that is a consistent point of feedback from everyone. So that packaging could be reduced, and it's acknowledged. So Linda, okay, I got your number here. Town Line Association. Okay. 6.
Very much.
Thank you, guys.
2.
I don't know how to remute my.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay.
We're almost over. It's no problem.
If the dog
We're
barks,
almost
don't be
finished.
upset.
No, it's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we love the dogs. That's fine. As long as they're not too loud. Jerry, I think we can go to the next slide. Is that okay?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. So if there's anyone on the meeting tonight who is an AICP planner. Oh, wait, we have a hand raised for Mr. Friedman, Barack Friedman. Did you have your hand raised? I can unmute you if you have a comment. You are unmuted now.
I think the hand was lowered.
There.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Here we are.
Hey, just had a question for you. I noticed that cities around the world are some of them are kind of tearing down their highways, like in Seoul, Korea, that happened, and Utrecht in the Netherlands that happened. I noticed that the BQE is falling apart, and it kind of slices through multiple neighborhoods, and it's extremely polluting and extremely deleterious for all the people who live along that route, as well as the FTR, as well as the Cross Bronx. It's, you know, extremely unpleasant and polluting for everybody who lives alongside. And, you know, state DOTs, you seem like really nice people, but state DOTs seem to really love highways and kind of expanding them, and kind of, you know, they go through residential neighborhoods. And I was wondering if there's anybody in your group who would consider such an act, and once it's done, nobody ever regrets it. Everybody loves the outcome. So I wonder if that's ever studied at state DOT level. You know. So
Okay.
anyway, that's my question.
No, that's a good question.
Thanks.
First of all, we're not a state DOT. We're we work for the MPO, and so that means we work for our council members. I do want to tell you just generally, it has happened in our region. The Sheridan Expressway, which was a small spur highway in the South Bronx, has been converted into an urban boulevard, actually. So yes, it has come up, and there's a long history going back. Well, it probably goes back decades, but it certainly goes back over the last 20 to 25 years of studying alternatives for the BQE. As you can imagine, the BQE is a major freight facility in our region too, not only for passenger cars, but also for goods movement. And so, you know, there have been tunnel options studied for the BQE. There's even now another assessment being done of the BQE as a corridor. There have been various freight weight limits put on the BQE in certain locations because of the nature of the and the condition of the infrastructure. It's amazing how much thought and effort has been given to what the best thing to do with the BQE is. And the tunnel option was studied extensively and was found to be incredibly expensive, although it would have the best impact in terms of taking that out of the communities and putting it under the communities, essentially, and also creating potentially new open space for use by the communities. It's difficult to say exactly what's going to happen going forward with the BQE. There are certainly some major infrastructure issues that have to be addressed, but its ultimate fate is kind of unpredictable at this point. But it has been looked at, and in fact has been done in our region, in New York City, over the past 20 years or so also.
Thank you.
Sure.
And we may have had Anna Alenic. Did you have a question as well? I thought I saw maybe your hand went up. You are unmuted if you did have a question. No? Okay. Might have just seen that and it wasn't really a question. Okay. As if anybody in the meeting tonight is a member of the oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you for unmuting me. No, I didn't have a question. Sorry
Okay.
if it was
Okay, no worries, no
misleading
worries.
hand raise.
No worries, no worries. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for responding.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight. So we have, you'll also see this slide if you are planning in the AICP and you would like to add this for CM credits, continuing credits for your AICP. You'll see in the chat, I just put a link at the APA website where you can log your attendance tonight. And usually APA does not ask for an evaluation form. If they happen to, you can always email us that form. I'll put my email in the chat and I'll forward it to you, to our person here at FHI who handles those logs. But this event is offering 1.5 APA CM credits. So you're welcome to take advantage of those. And I don't think we have any more questions in the chat.
No, I think this is the last thing, which is we very much appreciate your time. We talked to several dozen people today, both at the earlier session and now tonight, and we're happy to continue to collect this information. It's essential to the planning process. So thank you for the time. We know this is your time, so we appreciate you providing it to us, and we appreciate all the information that you provided. It's been excellent. And Linda, I will follow up with you in terms of the issue that we were discussing.
And regards to, so quick question, how many people came to the earlier session? We had between 40 and 50. So yep, it was a good turnout. So, and thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you.
Okay, folks, have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.